The simplest way of describing a physics that's based on the same geometry for both planetary and human energy fields would be, as above, so below, the Hermetic motto. Next on our tour is the Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel built by Napoleon. When you stand directly under the central arch, your body symbolically resonates with the sun. The name carousel suggests planets revolving about you. The 12 hedges representing constellations of the zodiac radiate like rays of the sun from exactly where you are standing. In addition to the official allegory of peace being guided by Napoleon's victories, the chariot drawn by 4 horses on top of the arch could just as well be read as the ancient depiction of Helios drawn by 4 horses. The oval that terminates the hedges symbolizes Kepler's scientific discovery that planets have elliptical orbits, and the square hedges must be the 2 foci of the ellipse. Napoleon was most obviously interested in correlating the human body with the sun. Le Notre laid out the Tuileries garden at the request of the Sun King. The garden's proportions, fountains, and parterre patterns amazingly fit the Jerusalem rectangle. See how the fountains are tangent to the X's? The octagonal fountain therefore corresponds with the Dome of the Rock, and the round fountain with the Holy Sepulchre. Paris is another New Jerusalem. When you train yourself to see Hermetic symbolism, it starts appearing all over Paris in plain sight. It can be a bit overwhelming. 2 equestrian statues flank the entrance to the Tuileries from la Place de la Concorde. Her exposed breast suggests this goddess might be Isis. The other rider is Mercury, holding the staff of Osiris, or Caduceus, which has become the symbol of the medical profession. Here's another possible Isis in the garden, and another Mercury. This golden boy is the genie of Paris atop the July column commemorating the Revolution of 1830. The genie is Mercury himself. The first time Hermetic symbolism had come completely out into the open in France was during the 1789 Revolution. Here's the Declaration of the Rights of Man depicting the all-seeing eye of the Supreme Being. Incidentally, this design was influenced by Benjamin Franklin, who is something of a Freemasonic celebrity in Paris at the time. Franklin helped design the Great Seal of the United States, which bears the same all-seeing eye. In time for the celebration of the heliacal rising of Sirius in 1793, this fountain was erected in La Place de la Bastille. The famous artist Jacques-Louis David sculpted the Fountain of Regeneration, with Isis even wearing an Egyptian headdress. The water streaming out of her breasts recalls the image of Saint Bernard de Clairvaux receiving milk from the Virgin. And how can we forget this view? The Eiffel Tower as Phallus of Osiris, with the Statue of Liberty replica on the Seine as his sister bride. The largest square in Paris is up next on the Isis axis. Believe it or not, La Place de la Concorde has an area of precisely 86,400 square meters. Remember the 864-foot-high Transamerica Pyramid and the 864,000 feet from Stonehenge to Silbury Hill? You see, it doesn't matter if we're talking metric or imperial units with shifted decimal places. What matters are the numbers. The fact is, the sun's diameter is 864,000 miles, and there are 86,400 seconds in a mean solar day. The area of the place thus confirms it as a solar symbol. The cars are likened to planets wandering around the elliptical traffic circle. The twin fountains symbolize the watery galactic midplane of the Milky Way, just as they do in front of the Vatican. That makes the Champs-Élysées the ecliptic. Le Notre designed La Place des Étoiles, where the Arc de Triomphe stands today. Standing at the center of the Place of the Star, the ceremonial arch is read literally as a stargate. 12 streets radiating outward represent a zodiac. The triumphal arch originally honored the warriors who fought for France in the Napoleonic Wars, and it later became the tomb of the unknown soldier. The eternal flame under the arch might be another solar reference. There's certainly a lot of sun worship going on in Paris. Napoleon invaded Egypt in 1798, and not even counting the Egyptians, the French death toll came to more than 20,000 souls. After France's great defeat, Napoleon was asked why he decided in the first place to invade Egypt. He said, "I came to draw attention and bring back the interest of Europe to the center of the ancient world." While the campaign was raging, Napoleon spent a night alone in the Great Pyramid, and when asked about his experience, he supposedly said, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." Moving on toward the strange attractor at the end of the axis, we finally conclude our journey through space and time at La Grande Arche. Contemporaneous with the Louvre Pyramid, the Grand Arch was also built at the request of President Mitterrand. This time Mitterrand held a national design competition, but personally selected architect Johann Otto von Spreckelsen in the end anyway. Unfortunately, Spreckelsen died before the project was completed. The location of the Grand Arch has a special relationship to the Arc de Triomphe, the Luxor obelisk, and the Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel. All four monuments are spaced in such a way to create this approximate doubling pattern, suggesting musical octaves. In addition, the Arc de Triomphe is roughly double the size of the Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel, and the Grand Arch is about double the size of the Arc de Triomphe. In the scaling of these three arches, I see three stargates representing the human, planetary, and stellar bodies, just as we saw symbolized with cubes in London and DC. Notre Dame Cathedral fits perfectly inside the Grand Arch. I'm guessing this is no accident. A tune in 3 octaves, if you will. I call it the Symphony of the Stargates. The dimensions of the monumental structure are cubic, with edge length measuring approximately 110 meters, or 360 feet. Researcher Jim Allison realized that 360 feet is also precisely equal to 210 Egyptian royal cubits, and I see that the office windows inside the arch are arranged in groups of 210, providing validation of this metrology. The exterior side's symbolic measure depicts 22/7 in meters. 22/7 is, of course, an approximation of pi. 12 columns internally support the structure, and a zodiac is literally depicted in the basement floor, making the arch yet another form of sun worship. The sides of the monumental arch actually contain some 40,000 square meters of office space. Multi-purpose rooms in the basement measure 400 square meters each. These numbers got me thinking. 40,000 and 400 are very interesting numbers. To appreciate this, let's start with the metric system. The metric system was originally defined by measuring the Earth. The original prime meridian passed through the Paris Observatory and continued all the way around the Earth. This circumference was defined as 40,000 kilometers in the 18th century, and this served to define the metric system. There are 121 documented bronze medallions marked Arago after the French astronomer embedded in streets and sidewalks in a line crossing Paris. These medallions mark the line of the Paris prime meridian that was used in France for 200 years. This line touches the corner of one of the Louvre's satellite pyramids. Perhaps this is why the smaller pyramids are there. The meter is the basic unit of length in science today. The meter's definition moved from being based in earth measure to a prototype bar to being circularly defined in terms of the speed of light, which is itself measured in meters per second. Christopher Knight and Alan Butler's book, Who Built the Moon, is really an eye-opener. Although I don't agree with their thesis that the moon is an artificial satellite, they have discovered numbers relating sun, moon, and earth that are too perfect to be the product of random chance. For example, consider a solar eclipse. When one happens, the moon completely covers the sun disk. The only reason this can occur so precisely is because the moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun, and happens to be 400 times closer than the sun during the eclipse. The Earth also turns 400 times faster than the moon. The odds of these three seemingly unrelated characteristics would all converge on the number 400 is literally astronomical. As I already mentioned, the axe historique is aligned with the heliacal rising of Sirius, known as the Star of Isis, but the Grand Arch is turned approximately 6 degrees with respect to this axis. This is, of course, no accident. Everything has a purpose. Can you imagine the mind-boggling planning that went into the Grand Arch alone? Groundbreaking architectural design that ties together layer upon layer of hidden symbolism, completing the hermetic masterpiece that is Paris. Jim Allison has found what the Grand Arch is pointing to. Are you ready for this? It points to the birthplace of Isis in Dendera, Egypt. This tiny, unassuming temple out and back of the larger Hathor temple is known as the traditional birthplace of Isis. The location of the small cube within the larger enclosure matches the azimuth where the Grand Arch is facing. Remember that the heliacal rising of Sirius was the basis of the ancient Egyptian calendar. Well, here is where all of that started. This is where ancient Egyptian priests saw her bright star rising just before the dawn, signaling the beginning of a new year. Isn't it amazing that the Champs-Élysées and Pennsylvania Avenue share the same astronomical orientation with this tiny backwater in modern Egypt? Backwater it may be today, but symbolically it's the holiest place in the cult of Isis. Napoleon came here and had a master mason cut out this massive ceiling from the adjacent temple and ship it back to Paris. It's called the Dendera Zodiac and is now suspended in the Louvre. As you can see, the Dendera Zodiac has octagram star symmetry. More than a zodiac, it is a planisphere showing the whole cosmology as seen through Egyptian eyes. Another Louvre ceiling that gets to the essence of things is François-Edouard Picot's Study and Genius reveal ancient Egypt and Greece. Hancock and Bivol recognized the importance of this hermetic work in their book Talisman. The painting allows the viewer to see Isis unveiled for Athena. This unveiling references Plutarch's first-century depiction of her temple at Sais, where it was inscribed, "I am all that has been, and is, and shall be. My veil no mortal hath ever raised." The term genius in the title is the epithet of the divine messenger Mercury, who is introducing Athena to Isis. I think the Western world, exemplified by Athena, is being introduced to the older stream of knowledge coming out of Egypt. As I can attest, the term study in the title refers to the intensive research required to uncover the deep Egyptian connections that the elite is so clearly obsessed with. Returning to Paris, let's look at the Grand Arch with fresh eyes. Remember that everything has a reason. The Grand Arch is in La Défense, the modern section of Paris. Why? We need a modern mathematical understanding to perceive its deepest symbol and to recognize it for what it truly is, a three-dimensional shadow of a hypercube. Come again? What is a hypercube? If the square is 2D, the cube is 3D, and the hypercube is the 4D equivalent. Here's what a cube looks like when it's being rotated. Here's what rotating a hypercube looks like in three-dimensional projection. The fourth dimension is hard to imagine because it's literally beyond us. You might be interested to learn that 4 spatial dimensions were known far before the birth of modern science. Here is what Saint Bernard de Clairvaux wrote to his former disciple, who became Pope Eugene III. What is God? He is length, width, height, and depth. There are 4 spatial terms used. Bernard described the 4th dimension in the 12th century. St. Paul also described 4 dimensions in the 1st century. That Christ may dwell in your hearts by faith, that ye, being rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all saints what is the breadth and length and depth and height, and to know the love of Christ, which passeth knowledge, that ye may be filled with all the fullness of God. 4 centuries before Paul, Plato even described higher dimensional reality in his allegory of the cave, which goes something like this. We are prisoners chained in a cave and sit facing a blank wall. There's a fire outside the cave, and unseen people are passing in front of it. We see shadows on the wall, and mistake this illusion for reality. I think we are kept in the dark about a great many things. Notice how the hypercube's shadow in 3D projection looks like a cube within a cube. This structure is fractal, meaning the same pattern repeats at different scales. We've seen things like this before in cities, buildings, and art. Consider the fractal-like City of London within Greater London, Vatican City within Rome, and the United Nations headquarters within New York City. On the scale of a building, take a look at the Dome of the Chain standing immediately outside the Dome of the Rock. It's the same structure repeated in a smaller scale, hinting at a higher dimensional connection for those who have eyes to read the symbolism. Examples from art are Pomodoro's series of golden spheres within spheres, scattered strategically in the Vatican, UN headquarters, museums in DC and San Francisco. The sacred Egyptian cubit is a unit of measure reserved for measuring the earth. One sacred cubit is equal to 6/5 raised to the 4th power in English feet. Think about it. Raising to the 4th power means the sacred cubit is literally a hypercubit. Michel and Heath have found there are 10 million hypercubits in the Earth's polar radius, and 63 million hypercubits in its meridian circumference. Now these amazingly round numbers measure our planet with remarkable accuracy. How can this be? Some physicists believe the universe is made of 10-dimensional superstrings, but 6 of them have curled up into unimaginably small size. The 4 remaining dimensions express the architecture of the universe. Recall how I saw in the union of both Louvre pyramids the knowledge of how energy flows from the sun through hyperspace into planetary bodies. In addition, the Earth is measured by a hypercubit whose edge length of 6/5 relates macrocosm to microcosm. The Earth is therefore a hyperdimensional object, even though with our normal perception we experience both the Earth and ourselves as being only 3-dimensional. Another projection of the hypercube into 2 dimensions looks like this. Do you see the octagram star within? This is where it all comes from. The sun is a hypercube. Recall Metatron's cube. Now that we understand the Grand Arch, we perceive Metatron's cube as Metatron's hypercube. This 4D solar symbol appropriately contains the 3D star tetrahedron and the 2D Star of David. We see now why these sacred diagrams are both called stars, because they are projections of our sun, which is itself a star. To make all of this 4-dimensional geometry easier to understand, it helps to bring it down a level. Unfolding a square gives you a line. Unfolding a cardboard cube gives you a cross. Unfolding a hypercube gives you a cross made of cubes. Salvador Dali started with this idea when he painted the Corpus Hypercubus. He depicts the crucifixion, yes, but what is he really saying? Corpus Hypercubus is the ascended body as hypercube. In analytic cubism, the art movement that anticipated Dali's surrealism, Picasso and Braque depicted objects from a multitude of viewpoints in an effort to see all sides at once. Of all the myriad forms in existence, why did they choose a cube to symbolize their art movement? Could these cubists have been privy to secret knowledge that inspired their attempt to paint the 4th dimension? Or did they follow unconscious synchromystic inspiration? Food for thought. So now we have the human body, the earth, and the sun symbolized as hypercubes. 3 cubes if you want to use a 3D symbol. So which is it? It's actually all of the above. The human, planetary, and stellar scales resonate as a fractal structure within the holographic universe. In simpler terms, as above, so below. Metatron's hypercube, as Enoch's hypercube, reveals the cosmic man. Enoch's triangle had the ineffable name of God written on it. Here is that name in Hebrew, which is a language read from right to left. Standing the letters up, we see the depiction of a man made in God's image. The cosmic man is Plato's world soul, alchemy's anima mundi, and the Kabbalah's Adam Kadmon. Here is a piece of my own artwork showing Adam Kadmon emerging from the tree of life. If the human body is a temple, then this temple is much more vast and interconnected than we ever imagined. The human energy form resonates with the esoteric architecture of the universe. What we know as the history of civilization is only a very small part of our past. There is something extraordinary about our beginnings not written about in history books. The oldest surviving temples encode an understanding of Earth, Moon, and Sun that is in some ways more advanced than modern science. To catch up with ancient knowledge, a broad interdisciplinary approach is clearly indicated. Specialists in art history, archaeology, architecture, philosophy, semiotics, mathematics, physics, and many others will need to cooperate in new ways. By seriously studying Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid, we've seen how people living at the dawn of civilization possess the ability to accurately measure the size of the Earth, and to survey long distances with a precision rivaling GPS satellites. Logically, our civilization must therefore be a legacy from an earlier civilization. Whether this was Atlantis and/or an off-world civilization, I cannot presently say with certainty. The rediscovery of the importance of number, geometry, music, and astronomy should rekindle interest in ancient Egyptian knowledge passed down to us by philosophers such as Pythagoras and Plato. Understanding how the macrocosm and microcosm are related through the art of sacred geometry, in the act of measuring structures and the earth, is a thing of profound beauty. Relating sixes to fives by drawing hexagons and pentagons in the landscape, or by measuring with Egyptian units, are brilliant examples of this ancient science at work. Finding Pythagorean triangles, 5 by 12 rectangles, pyramids, octograms, enneagrams, and zodiacs encoded in much of the world's great architecture and urban design exposes an obsession with ancient symbolism spanning the centuries. If the designers take this symbolism so seriously, then there must really be power in ancient knowledge. Putting this story together has been by far the most challenging and satisfying project of my professional life. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I invite your participation in uncovering more secrets in plain sight.